It was one of the big stories last week, South Africa's largest medical aid administrator, Discovery, becoming the second company to announce mandatory COVID-19 vaccinations for employees. That's amid concerns that a mandatory vaccine policy could force employees to choose between keeping their jobs or getting the jab. Let's unpack the story now. Our guests on this issue are SATU General Secretary Mugwena Maluleke and NEHAWU's General Secretary Zola Saphetha, who both join us via our video link this morning. Gentlemen, it's great to have you with us on the show this morning. Mugwena, let's begin with you. What do you make of this latest move by Discovery, and do you reckon it's something that we might be looking to in the public service?
Michelle, good morning, and good morning to your viewers at home, and good morning to my comrade Saphetha, and thank you for the question indeed. Look, Michelle, we have delayed the inevitable. Of course, we know very well that Discovery is just doing what the Disaster Management Act as published by the Minister of Employment and Labour has indicated to employers that employers can, if they have consulted their employees through their representative being the unions, that they can declare that vaccine be made mandatory. And that was published around June this year. And I think we have debated this particular issue to say, yes, you cannot discriminate against any employee or any other person who's seeking employment in terms of Section 6 of the Equity Act, which is very broadened for that matter. So therefore, however, what is happening in the country, it is that employers would use that particular definition, which is broadened, to say we want to make sure that workplace is safe for everyone. So the right of the vaccinated and the right of the unvaccinated have got to be balanced, and therefore Discovery and any other employer that has begun this particular debate is just the beginning of the debate. In the public service, whether we know the employers in public service being the government in terms of Section 9 of the Constitution would be prohibited from doing that because they cannot discriminate against. However, Section 6 does not discriminate against whether it is government or is a private employer. It would say there are grounds for you not to discriminate, but there are grounds for you to say this is fair discrimination because in terms of policy, in terms of practice. So yes, it's a debate that we cannot run away from.
So that's the word from SATU. Let's bring in NEHAWU now and Zola Saphetha. What's your take on this issue, Mr. Saphetha, just given the kind of responses we've seen in both your industries insofar as the vaccines are concerned, many of your members declining to take the jab?
Yes, good morning to you and to your viewers and the principal ladies of SATU. Indeed, we would love to see a society that would be encouraged to be vaccinated. However, we should respect the health and the constitutional right of every individual to vaccination. And that you know that South Africa is not a banana republic. We are regulated and the rights therefore are regulated. But it's important that we see everyone else having vaccinated. So we will not, the enforcement to that will result into, undesirable consequences given the health right and the consequence of the legislative framework that is there. However, I want also to make a point that as much as the Labour Relations Act has encouraged a discussion between the employer and employee, but we view that it should have started by itself, by leading by example to bring Labour at the center of that kind of a proposed legislation. Unfortunately, Labour has not been brought there, yet is forced or imposed to be engaging with the lower layers of the employment. So we do think that that dialogue should take place between the Department of Labour itself and trade unions, culminating to a situation that will be conducive at the level of the workplace, as opposed to be forcing that discussion to take place at the workplace, besides the national level trends in terms of how really should you protect the workplace. So
as NEHAWU, you won't be issuing any kind of directive to your members insofar as vaccines are concerned?
You'll remember that from February, we have been on the ground, we have been encouraging members to do so. And at some point, you remember that the leadership of NEHAWU was the first one, immediately after the President and Minister, to be vaccinated just to give confidence to members. For instance, one of the big issues that has not been clarified by scientists themselves is the lifespan of the vaccine in your body. By I mean how long the immunity lasts, because there is an anxiety now in the healthcare workers who have been vaccinated in February and have been hearing some contradictions that is going to last 8 to 9 months, and now it's almost 8 months as they've been vaccinated, and they don't know what will happen moving forward. So as long as proper clarity is not given to society in the manner that it stabilizes and also deals with insecurities, we will continue to have this kind of problems of people not being certain or sure about whether or not should be vaccinated and so forth. So a key is a kind of a message that we communicate that brings stability and ensure that it doesn't create anxiety to society.
That issue of clear communication from government, Mr. Maluleke, is a big issue. Have your members also complained about a similar lack of credible information coming from the state insofar as vaccines are concerned?
Let me agree with my comrade Saphetha that yes, there is mixed messages, and therefore we need to be addressing that now. Members obviously are also concerned about that and so forth. So we would urge that the scientists work very hard together with our government and ourselves as Labour to ensure that we provide that particular clarity. And as comrade Saphetha has said, our call basically is to say, please, let's have as many people as possible to be vaccinated, given that the science has said that we need herd immunity, and for us to be able to reach herd immunity so that we cannot be worried about this particular virus is to have as many people as possible being vaccinated. Because whilst we can talk about the rights of the unvaccinated, we must also be saying there will come a time, Michelle, where the workers on a workplace would say to the employer, we are vaccinated, and therefore we don't think that we can enter your workplace given the fact that you are also allowing the unvaccinated. That kind of a situation is going to be very, very ugly because we have not had a jurisprudence now in terms of our labor courts in the country dealing with that type of a situation, given the fact that the anti-vaxxers basically are not presenting to us any scientific reasoning apart from saying it is my constitutional right, and any right, Michelle, is limited. So once we would want to urge that, yes, we respect the rights of everybody, let's also respect the rights of the vaccinated to work in an environment where there are no factories for mutants, because science is telling us that, yes, if you remain unvaccinated, you are likely to become a factory of mutants. So this is the information we're supposed to be sharing with our members and everyone else to say, please, let's save lives by being vaccinated and so forth, so that we avoid a situation where vaccination is made mandatory. But I am saying, and I want to believe that my comrade Saphetha is also going to be confronted with that situation from his members who would be saying, I'm vaccinated. What are my rights? Are you going to enforce my rights to be safe at the workplace? What are you doing? And so forth.
Yeah, Mr. Saphetha, I mean, that's an important point. In so much as it is your right to refuse the vaccine, it is also the right of the broader population that has to come into play. So in as much as the unvaccinated is asking for protection, those who are vaccinated can also ask for the same.
Certainly. That's why we say the issue of the coronavirus should be taken as a societal issue, where everyone in society has a responsibility to save the nation, not only healthcare workers. But in such a matter that requires society and level of awareness, it requires that we take along, not to impose. Once you impose, you create antagonism in society. Remember, others, they just make the position without really appreciating the viciousness and the extent to which this virus will be impacting. So in the presence of the lack of information and education, such will happen. So it requires everyone else to mobilize society and encourage them. But in the context of doing so, we must be more prepared to persuade people as and when they raise their right, so that that right doesn't impact negatively to the others. That's the point that we are making. For instance, we don't think that what is proposed by the Department of Health now is the right way. The approach of incentivizing those who have been vaccinated yet they have failed to incentivize those who are vaccinating. So we're saying that let's strike a balance in all efforts that we're making, because now currently there's a discussion that says to what an extent of incentivizing people as part of encouraging, yet those who are vaccinated, they are still left without any form of encouragement in them. So we're saying that in totality, let's consider everything else, including the rights. For instance, what we would say when a person is entitled to the health rights, that in a situation confronting him or her at the time health-wise would not permit a person to be vaccinated. How do we deal with those? So we have to treat things on merit, but also taking into account that all rights, we must strike a balance to all rights, and also people are taken along in so that, because if we want to be a winning nation, we must take the society along as opposed to be imposing them.
Insofar as the dismissal clause in the Labour Relations Act is concerned, Mr. Maluleke, that clause, we understand, when those discussions between NEDLAC and business were on the table, that clause was eventually scrapped. But the point is that businesses can still choose, employers can still choose to dismiss you and then face the consequences as the employer. It's the employee that's going to suffer in that kind of scenario.
Well, yes, because the issue of the dismissal based on discrimination, there are grounds that have been laid out in terms of the legislation, and any employer has got to prove that the dismissal is based on a fair procedure and a substantive matter that is on the ground. But on this particular health issue, unfortunately, the Section 6 of the Equity Act would take precedence to any other thing, because these are listed issues to say you have a right to your conscience, you have a right to believe your religion, and anyone who would say, look, I have a right to a decision I have made not to be vaccinated, when you are dismissing such person, the courts have set two tests, and that test, I think, has got to be broadened, because that particular dismissal is going to be found to be unfair dismissal, because you'll be basing it on the listed grounds that you cannot dismiss a person for refusing vaccination. So the other issue that, Michelle, I want to raise is the issue that whilst that has been dealt with in terms of dismissal, but what about the broader policy issue in terms of policy and practice? You know, the section has been broadened in such a way that the definition is such that it does not only deal with the issue whether you are dismissed or not dismissed, it also deals with the issue of recruitment and application. When you are still being recruited, you have to be regarded as almost like an employee and be treated with the same rights like an employee. So the employers are going to find it very difficult to deal with it. But unfortunately, again, Section 33 of our Constitution, every right is limited, and that particular limiting clause is going to be tested when they do the third.
Yeah, mandatory vaccines in the workplace. Unions weighing in on this issue. They say they've advised their members to get vaccinated. They're trying to give the right information in the midst of a lot of misinformation. Mugwena Maluleke speaks on behalf of SATU. Zola Saphetha is NAHAU's General Secretary. Thanks to you both for your time.